Never Mind the Buzzwords is a community event from Jigsaw Better Business. Taking place bi-monthly, its aim is to build a community of businesses and professionals where you can learn, share and connect. It's about going beyond the jargon and coming away from each session with knowledge, tangible tools, tips, strategies, and hopefully an extended network. Each event is focused either on people or a process. In the process sessions, we talk about how we deliver value in our business. Topics here include lean tools and thinking, operational excellence, sustainability, and digital transformation. In the people sessions, we look beyond the process to the who, discussing topics like leadership, teams, culture, and professional development. Never Mind the Buzzwords isn't just an event that you attend, it's an event to participate in. So get involved in the conversation, put your camera on if you can, share your thoughts, ideas or questions in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. And don't forget to stay in touch. We have a LinkedIn group where we upload resources and recordings from this community. And if you follow Never Mind the Buzzwords on Eventbrite, you'll be notified whenever we post a new event. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Lovely to see some of you joining there for this Never Mind the Buzzwords session. Let me just pop up the slide there to show you what we are talking about today. So I suppose with these sessions, we always try to match what's going on for our clients and for people. We try to make them as relevant as possible. So we're kind of, basing it on what clients are saying to us. And something that often comes up as both, I suppose, a benefit and a challenge is around that increased flexibility about, what's now expected in many workplaces. Hybrid is kind of becoming the norm in many workplaces. Some employers are kind of saying to us, we really want to get people back into the office, or maybe they're struggling to do that. Some are maybe doing the outright kind of, no, we're getting people back in, we're insisting that they come back in, and maybe that can backfire on them sometimes, people coming in and not being happy to be in, or coming in or just even leaving the company to search for greater flexibility. I suppose as well as that, the talent market is still quite competitive, it seems. So companies are trying to attract and retain top talent and those kind of star performers, and they're seeing, okay, what can set us apart from our competitors? And maybe it is something like a flexible schedule or an amazing workplace. And I think as well as that, a wider trend then is, I suppose there's just more of that movement towards treating workers as humans, not just a resource to be used and abused. Compared to previous decades, we now definitely have more rights as workers, even just health and safety regulations, things like that. So we are definitely moving towards greater physical and mental well-being for workers. So we've got all of that going on, and that leads us to something that I suppose a lot of employers and employees are curious about and talking about, which is what we're focusing on today. How do we design workplaces to, I suppose, evoke the right emotions? How do we, I suppose, create workplaces that maybe people want to come into? As we go through today, do put any questions or comments into the chat as we go along, and we'll address those. But I'm delighted today to be joined by Becky Turner. So Becky is a workplace psychologist with Claremont, and she is there helping companies to enhance their workplaces. So helping them design that ecosystem, their community, reflecting their purpose and their values through their workplace. So delighted to be joined by you today, Becky. Maybe could you tell us a little bit about, I suppose, how you got into this field, or what a kind of typical working week might look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I guess to start from the beginning, I kind of fell into the field a little bit. Interestingly enough, my background is in psychology. I worked in the education sector for a little while, which is completely different. And actually, it was due to a geographical relocation that I kind of fumbled into this job, or this company. So I began here about 7 or 8 years ago, doing marketing and sales, actually. So what Claremont do, we design and build offices, workspaces predominantly. So I came in and I got to really understand the business. I kind of fell in love with the whole purpose of what we do. We're making lives better for people when they're in their workplace, which at the time was very often. Like you're looking at the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday back then. So whatever small changes that we could do that are positive and positively impact people's experiences there, it's all for the better. So we sort of saw a little bit of a gap in what we did with our designers and thought, we're moving towards this slightly more human focused, as you've mentioned in that intro there. But all of our designers come from an interior design background, which, you would expect, really. And a lot of what they do focuses on concept and bringing that to life. And really, it doesn't negate the end user, but it doesn't put that at the forefront of their thinking. So I saw a way that could maybe marry. So found a university course, went and did a master's in organizational psychology while still working here. So Claremont supported me on the way there and kind of merged into our workplace consultancy team, which I'll get onto in a second, I suppose, because that's all about the day-to-day. So it's been a bit of a journey. I absolutely loved it. And if you told me 10 years ago that I'd be working as a workplace psychologist, I probably have thought, I'd rather get into criminal profiling or, some clinical stuff, something really extremely different. But actually the impact of this, like I say, it's on everyone every day. So that's a little bit about that background. Brilliant. I'd say day to day, it kind of fluctuates. So a large part of what I do is working alongside our clients. So people who have identified the fact that they've got a challenge with their workplace maybe, or need to refurbish it because they're coming to a break, or it's maybe 20 years old. They might be relocating. So all of these things, or particularly now they might be resizing because actually with the hybrid way of working, they're much less densely occupied. So they might be going to a smaller space. What I would do is go in with our team of workplace psychologists, workplace consultants, and really speak to the business leaders and the employees across the floor just about, what do you need from a workplace? What's going to help you work more effectively, work more positively? These days, what's going to help make that decision about whether you come into the office on a particular day or do you work from home? Because obviously now there's often more of a choice if that's the kind of hybrid model you've adopted. So yeah, we'll go in and we'll do surveys, we'll do workshops, interviews, focus groups, all kinds of things, occupancy studies to just really get a bit of objective data about how the space is actually being used at the time. And then we'll bring that all together, we'll analyse it as a little team. It's all done quite manually these days still, so we want to make sure that we are offering the right solutions and we're not just creating a cookie cutter response there. So that's the first bit of what we do. Then I'm also supporting the design team to make sure that we are designing for the people and using from my perspective, it's using a lot of psychological theories to just make sure that we're implementing them within the workplace and designing kind of innovatively in that way. So, and again, also taking on the trends like diversity and inclusion and making sure that our workplaces as standard are inclusive and equitable. At least putting that to the client and making them, giving them as much information as possible. And sometimes they might value engineer it down and take out a few points that we've recommended, but sometimes we'll really fight back against that. And then I guess not the final thing, there's plenty in between, but another thing is helping clients on that change journey as well, because although it's largely a positive change that they're going through, if it feels as though it's imposed on you or you don't quite understand what's going on or what your new space is going to look like on day one, it can be quite anxiety evoking. So it's all about trying to make sure people are as comfortable as possible, understand how to use the space, where they're going, all of those things really, just to make sure on day one they're really ready to go.
Yeah, brilliant. That sounds so interesting. And
Yeah.
it definitely resonates with me, the whole idea of, we often spend a lot of time in work. So if we can do anything to improve that, then that's valuable.
Yeah.
Um, and also, yeah, you mentioned there about the, why someone might come in or not go in on a particular day. And I just have a quick poll that I might pop up for everyone, just to see. Let me see where that is. Launch that poll there. So we've got just a couple of questions there just to get people's input. So the first one is, why do you like to come into your workplace? Or maybe if you say are currently working remotely, or maybe you don't have a workplace at the moment, a physical workplace, maybe why would you like to come into a workplace? So is it, nice atmosphere? Is it to build relationships? Maybe the better technical capabilities. I know some people, I think even in, say rural Ireland, might be struggling with Wi-Fi at home. So they might need to go into a, a hub or something like that. Another one might be that if it has any impact on your health, like for example, maybe you walk to the office and it's kind of an excuse to walk or cycle. Maybe if your workplace offers healthy food or a gym or anything like that. Or if you have anything else that would draw you towards a workplace, pop it into the chat. I'd love to hear that. And then the second question is, why don't you or why wouldn't you come into a workplace? What will kind of put you off? And I have made a typo in the first one. I was obviously in a bit of a rush. Distractions. Slight typo there, but yeah, distractions, people making noise or people interrupting your work. Or is it the physical environment? Maybe, yeah, I don't really like the look of that workplace. Our office is, maybe there's no natural light, or maybe, whatever it might be. Another option there is saving on the cost and time that it takes to travel to get to a physical workplace. Maybe it has any kind of impact on your hobbies. It stops you from doing things that you might like to do. Maybe if you have to travel to and from work, you can't go to the gym, or you can't do something else. Or maybe it's less time with friends and family. Again, maybe it's eating into your evening or your morning, or anything else. Pop it into the chat. Any other ideas? So we'll just give you a couple of minutes to. I can see most people have answered that. So yeah, it's I can see, I suppose there's a couple of different responses. I'll just share the results there so that we can all see. So on that first question, why do you or would you like to come into the workplace? The majority, 75% of people saying it's about building relationships and having that collaboration with their colleagues. And then another, 13% each way, kind of saying that maybe there's better tech in the office, or that it has some kind of impact on your health. And then the second question, why don't you or wouldn't you come into the workplace? The majority, 50%, it's about the time and the cost of travel. It's paying for buses and trains or petrol or anything like that. And it's, yeah, the time that we might feel we're losing if we're going into the office. And then another, few people were saying there's distractions, maybe the physical environment isn't good. And another 13% saying less time with friends and family, and another 13% saying other. So it's good just to get a sense of what people are feeling, what they like and what they don't like. I suppose, Becky, does that kind of resonate with what you would often hear? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'm really glad that those answers have come out, because it corroborates a piece of research that we've done recently, which is the workplace Oooh, like Oooh, which is sort of giving you that feeling when you're walking into a space, like, oh, okay, Oooh, like it's that visceral kind of audible feeling that you get. And yeah, the thing that came out top for us in that research, which was over 1,006 people, I think it was, that we got responses from in the end, was people would come in for the company of others, and to be around others and to build those relationships. So that's really in line with what this poll suggested from you guys on the call now. So it's so important to feel that sense of connection, both to your organization and to each other. And that's something that I think was massively missing during the pandemic. when everyone was working from home, and I know over there you had quite tight restrictions for a lot of the time, and there was so much isolation and loneliness. And that really, you know, it's a human need, it's a human desire to feel part of a group, to be included within a group, and to feel excluded is, you know, incredibly bad for our mental health. So yeah, that being around other people and building relationships is so important. I think from an organizational perspective as well, it allows you to build trust. So whether it's connection in a social sense, or connection because you might be collaborating on a piece of work, or even just working closely with each other in the same vicinity, and it's almost a passive collaboration. It's going to help you so much as an organization and your outputs, because maybe you don't want to expect everybody to be in the office every day now. They might be able to do something better from home, but to then be able to have that sense of trust in your team because you've developed these relationships, you can go away and know that people are going to be doing what they need to be doing, or know that they're just going to contact you if they need anything, because you have built those relationships. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even, you know, I suppose it's like you kind of mentioned there, even if you're just sort of around other people, and I think even especially, you know, maybe when the pressure is on, that you don't feel like I'm completely alone, I'm dealing with all this stress or all these problems completely by myself, you know, even just being able to sort of turn to someone who kind of goes, yeah, I know, like, let's get through this together kind of thing. I think it could be helpful in sort of building that resilience, I guess, as well.
Yeah, it's almost that sense of camaraderie, isn't it? That we're all in it together. Let's pull each other through. And we see it quite a lot with contact centres or customer service sort of teams.
Right. Yeah.
Particularly, there's one organisation that we worked with that are a debt charity, and they have a lot of calls that are people in, you know, in highly emotive states and distress. And it's these people, they're taking the call. You know, they might be doing this for 7 hours in a row. And if they've got nobody around to decompress a little bit with after a call, because they need to go back on the next call and be at that optimal level again. Yeah. You know, that impact of just turning to somebody and being like, was that okay? Did I deal with that okay? Or like, oh, that was awful. And you know, they just sort of put your, maybe it's a metaphorical arm around you and just go grab a brew quickly or take 5 minutes. So you're right, it's so important for teamwork to be around people every now and again, or at least have the mechanisms in place to have that less transactional and more informal relationships.
Yeah, definitely. That was something that came up so much over COVID, was how do we get back that kind of informal chat, you know, the water cooler moments when you have to set up a Teams call and everything like that. So yeah, definitely having that mechanism that can be valuable.
Yeah. And I think the thing about those moments is that when they do happen in person, they are spontaneous. Whereas if you're setting up a call for it, it's still forced fun. Some people might see it as
a little bit. Yeah.
And particularly like for the introverts and the people that don't necessarily enjoy the social side of things, but they might like to just be around it rather than actively involved in it. It's still, it's more difficult to do online. It's not impossible. It just takes that little bit more effort, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I suppose, you know, we're talking about, like, I've got the 2 images up here of, you know, maybe a not so great workspace and a much more productive one. And I think it might be good even just to give people a sort of illustration of some of the work that you've done in the past. And we've this example, which is Flutter in Dublin. So I'll just play that video so that people can kind of get maybe a visual for it as we're talking about it. I love that. I think the thing that really came through for me there was, um, I think we kind of got a sense of what this company does. Like when you said Flutter initially, I remember I was like, oh, I'm not really sure what they do.
Mhm.
But you can tell what they do and what their sort of values are, and it's kind of imbued through the workspace, and it just looked, yeah, amazing. Um,
Yeah.
what yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that one maybe?
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that that's a milestone project for us. It's 126,000 square feet, and a lot of what we do is a lot smaller than that. But the great thing about the way that we're designing workplaces now, we call it the destination office. It's that it's quite scalable. So yes, not everyone's got 126,000 square feet in a workforce that sort of size. But you can really take elements of that type of design and the principles of the design, and build it through what you need as an organization, what you've got as well, budget wise, space wise, people wise. So you'll see the amount of variety of spaces. One of the key things is that we can't take away desks completely. A lot of what you hear about is, come in to collaborate, we'll put a great coffee machine in, and we'll take some of the desks out, and say, okay, fine, that might work, but what's the optimum ratio for you? So we talk about people to desk ratios. Before COVID, I suppose, before everything changed during the pandemic, we were looking at about, for every 10 people we would put at about 8 desks.
Okay.
And that counts for sick leave, for absences. Generally people might be out and about with clients depending on your business, but it was still seen as fairly radical at the time to do that. So not everybody had their own desk, and it was that term hot desking that seems to have the kind of gets people's the hairs on the back of the necks up a little bit. But now we're looking at an average of about, for every 10 people, it's around 6 desks that we're putting in. So these are workstations that might have screens. They've got your task chairs on, which are the specific chairs that you can sit on for sort of 8-9 hours a day if you wanted to. So they're all very ergonomically sound. But it's not all about that. So clearly you can save a little bit of space with your less desks, but you're also putting in these informal collaboration spaces as well. So they might be soft seating, they might be small booths that are quite acoustically treated, so that they'll all have soft material around them, so that it really is absorbing the noise around you, and it's the less harsh and the less hard surfaces you've got in your space, the better, from a noise perspective. So we'll be putting all different types of spaces. And for us, it's about understanding what people do want to be doing in their offices. So actually, if you're doing a lot of informal one-to-one kind of meetings with colleagues, and that could be senior leaders, or it could just be sort of your peers, then do you need to do that in a meeting room? Or if you're going to do it by your desk, is that going to distract everybody around you? So okay, maybe we don't need an 8-person meeting room to hold this 2-person meeting that's not even private. Let's put in a booth, or let's make the sort of kitchen, canteen, social space a little bit more friendly. Let's make it like a coffee shop, because we'd find a lot of our clients would go out to, especially if they're in a building and there was a coffee shop at the bottom, or within the space, they might go and have an informal meeting there. And we were thinking, okay, so they're leaving the building, so that takes time, and what is it they're trying to get from that space? It's to feel a bit different, it's to get the ambience of a coffee shop, it's to have a more informal view, and possibly to just get a really good coffee. So okay, how do we replicate that in the space? So all of these things we're just designing for massive variation, I think, and this suits the neurodivergent community because they can explicitly decide. We can give them clear instructions about what you're doing in each space if they wanted to go by that. Some people might use it slightly differently, but for a lot of the neurodivergent community, you want to make it as explicit as possible without unwritten rules, I suppose. It helps different personality types, it helps men and women, it helps different working practices, whether you're in the office 5 days a week, or you might be popping in every now and again just to check your emails and sit in meetings. So yeah, you're covering all bases where possible.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, I love that you're mentioning that it's really capturing every different kind of person, because again, previously it probably was very one size fits all, you kind of have to fit into this mold, whereas now it's kind of going, well, what can again make each individual that might have a different working schedule, might have different preferences and needs, how do we suit all those different people? And you kind of touched on it there, that obviously I think some companies might be thinking, well, I don't have millions to invest in this. So how can I, achieve something like that? How can I, convey my sort of identity and values? Maybe we only have a small team, or we don't have a huge budget. Would you have any, I suppose, recommendations or suggestions for those kind of people?
Yeah. Like I say, it's quite scalable. So think about your business. Think about the direction and the vision that your business is going. Are you growing? Are you quite comfortable where you are? Are you shrinking? Do you know your people? Do you know them well enough to assume what they might need from a space? Or I would always recommend asking them the question, because that might take them on the journey with you. And it can, together with your business needs and your people needs, you can almost establish your high impact, what's going to make the biggest impact within the space that you've got, if you've got space. What's going to, it doesn't have to cost the world. There are a lot of things that you could get from IKEA or the shop down the road that can help your space, but really thinking about maximum impact. So for one of our clients, or a partner of ours, really, they support us on the neurodiversity journey, as I mentioned, and they're only about 6-7 people. And we're looking at their space with them at the moment, and their key impact statement, I suppose, is noise. They do a lot of podcasting, they do a lot of e-learning, so they need to make sure that they are able to do that in a space that's private, and you're not hearing Joe next door also on a call. So for them, that's their impact statement, and that's where we're going to support them the most on screens that are acoustic, that they can move around, so that 2 people can be having a call at the same time, but it's flexible, so then when they're not on a call, they can move it back and still have that sense of connection with each other. Also, brand for those is important, so we're going to be looking at getting some, so for example, behind me here, it would be their logo. It would be just sort of some muted palette colors on the walls to just reflect them and who they are a little bit more. So that's small. Biophilic design as well. I'm not sure if this is a concept that you've heard of, or you might hear it flown around a little bit, but this is all about nature, and it comes from the term biophilia, which is the love of life. So our natural, as humans, our natural connection with nature, and that's something that we seek. And as you mentioned before, it's, natural light is a big thing. Not that we always think about it. So trying to enhance that where possible. Could be bringing in natural elements, so a bit more wood, a bit more softer finishes. It's not so many straight lines in nature, so trying to build in some angles. Sense of space is important. Planting, greenery, possibly even soundscapes if you wanted to play something through. So all of these things don't need to cost too much, but it's, they've got big impact. That biophilic design, it can really reduce stress levels, and it's shown to improve creativity and focus. So there's business cases for it all.
That's amazing. I've never heard that term biophilic design before, but it absolutely, I think, makes sense to me anyway. And I think, it is something that's often lacking in our lives. If we feel that, we have to go in and sit at a desk and sit in an office, we kind of feel maybe disconnected from nature. So I love that concept of the greenery, or the more natural, kind of fewer straight lines, and maybe plastic and metal, and more kind of wood, and more natural. That sounds great. I'm just coming to the chat, and again, if anyone has any further questions or comments, do pop them in. But one of the comments there, a friend of mine purchased a treadmill desk for her home office last year so she could combine working and walking. She felt more productive after this investment. Have you experienced any increased demand for home office equipment for your clients? Is that something you would do?
We often get asked about it. We can advise, but typically it's not really what we would do. We may supply some chairs that are appropriate and things like that through our furniture team, but we're not manufacturers ourselves, so it's more advice, I think, and again understanding what people want to do in the office as well as what they want to do at home. And for what they want to do at home, often it is the focus type things, or it's the back-to-back Teams meetings, so we could definitely advise on what a good setup might look like, but typically it's the design element that we do focuses on the commercial space.
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, I think even just, anecdotally, like Matthias is saying in the comments, it's just those little things that make you feel, people are kind of upgrading their space a little bit.
I think we're still in almost the dust hasn't fully settled, I think, since COVID, and understanding what hybrid really means for you. There's a lot of, I'm coming across a lot of organisations mandating return to the office, typically 3 days a week, sometimes 4, which I think is an okay stepping stone to changing habits of getting up and thinking, okay, I'll just go to my kitchen table and off we go. So you are changing habit and getting people to come back into the office and reconnect. However, I don't think mandating days is going to be the best way forward. It's a personal opinion, I suppose, from looking at research and understanding people within the spaces, because although people like routine, they also like a sense of control, and they'll get a bit more flexibility and control, possibly from your organisation competitor down the road. So by helping people understand their diaries and maybe what could be done in the office, what could be done at home, understanding commute times. Maybe we sometimes do postcode analysis to see, how far away people are. How much is it going to cost them if they come in by public transport, by car? Do you have enough car parking spaces? You're introducing electric vehicle charging. All of these things impact why people might want to or might not want to come into the office.
And that came through in the poll. That was the top reason, is the time and cost of travel.
It's all about earning that commute, whether it's, like you say, earning the time or the cost, because people might have gained an hour with their families, or they might have gained an hour in the evenings doing their, as you mentioned before, hobbies, or whatever that might be for them. However, some people really enjoy that separation between work and home, and that, for me personally, I quite like the commute home. It's not too long, it's about 20 minutes or an hour on the bike. It's just a nice way to kind of clear your head and I suppose reflect on the day if it's the end of the day, or just get into the zone for the day at the beginning. And I'm aware that's a personal preference as well, whereas some people just like to roll out of bed and off you go into your work.
Yeah, absolutely. I know my mom was saying she needed to try and get back into cycling, because she used to cycle into work every day. And then she was like, oh God, over COVID, if there's no reason to be cycling, she wasn't doing it. So I'd say a lot of people are kind of like that bit of, okay, there's a reason for me to get up and either get walking or cycling, or have that bit of headspace to separate, okay, the work day is over, or the work day is about to begin, to kind of mentally prepare. There was another comment there. A recurring subject that people I talk to mention is they don't enjoy going to the office simply because they barely have time to interact with their colleagues when they do, and that there are so few opportunities to get to know them better. Have you worked on any initiatives to support organizations to give employees more opportunities to build better relationships with others at work?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of facets to this question. One being, perhaps there's a bit of burnout happening, possibly, if you are that back to back. I imagine it's exhausting. That could be Teams meetings that, we've got into this meeting culture now, and I think it was happening prior to COVID, but since as well, when it's been Teams, you can just look in people's diaries and it often goes back to back, and you do need a bit of breathing space every now and again. It's not great for well-being. And in fact, it's not great for productivity, because really, if you're in your 6th meeting of the day and you've not had a chance to go and get your lunch or have a quick chat with your colleague, how productive, how much information are you taking in, how much are you contributing? So there's a cultural element there of considering cultural and looking at your processes as well. like, have we got a really strong meeting culture here? Are we pushing it too far? Does it have to be a meeting, or could it be something different? Or just in the way of how much work you've got on, which, you know, that's a completely different question that's out of our remit, but we see it that people are so burning out because they've just got so much on their cards at the time.
And I was going to just say, I'd say that's kind of frustrating for you. You know, you're putting all this time and effort into designing an amazing workplace, and then, you know, there's still no real effort maybe to actually change. You know, they're kind of like the whole thing of, oh, we'll put some ping pong tables in and then everyone will, you know, their wellness will be perfect, you know. And it's like, if this toxic culture, now we can ignore that, we've got beer on Fridays, you know, that kind of thing.
Exactly. So. And I think these things have got to be added extras, right? They're the nice to haves at the end of it, and they definitely have a purpose. So you might build in for us, we are building in what we would call like a social heart of the offices. So say you're on a couple of floors, 3 floors, rather than building a kitchen on each floor, you might have little tea points so that people can stay hydrated and grab their drink without having to walk halfway around the office. But really, you put your best coffee machine or your teas or, you know, your nice stuff in this central space, which, like I mentioned earlier, could also be a cafe, an informal meeting area, and you can flex the furniture and have it as a big, we would call it a town hall space, but where you might present to your colleagues and give them some insights into the business or do events. So create this flexible space that drives those spontaneous interactions where possible. So that's one thing. We've got to provide a platform for these kind of interactions, and that might include, as you saw in the Flutter, it had shuffleboard on the top, it had games, and that's considering their demographic as well as young gamers that are, or people that are interested in tech and they want to bring in the best talent that they can, and they're competing with others. So you've got to consider that at the same time. But if you don't build in space for these connections, then it's not going to happen. What we can often do is influence culture just by providing the right tools. So you provide the spaces for these kind of social interactions, and that might then mean that one of your back-to-back meetings that was in a formal meeting room could be a coffee and a more informal conversation in that space, and then you're breaking down those barriers a little bit more. So although we can't define culture or change culture, we can help provide a platform for that change if that's the way that you want to go down.
That's brilliant. And I think it kind of reminds me as well of certain workplaces or certain, you know, people I've talked to where they were saying like, oh yeah, like it was a great workplace, but you know, if you were seen to be using these, you know, areas where you can take a break, that would be really frowned upon, you know. So like you say there, I suppose it's the culture kind of really comes into it as well.
Change has got to come from the top, and a lot of organizations, they might have archaic kind of views at the top that might be slightly out of touch. We're looking at about, I think it's 75% of the workforce is due to be millennial by 2025, so that's not far away. That's a massive number, and what not that we're discounting the other generations by any means, but what do they really want from the space? And that's they do want a sense of connection. They want to be able to carry out their work, but also a sense of connection and not to be burnt out. So providing these moments of relief is important, retreat moments. Even one organization I was speaking to in London, they're quite, that office was quite small. It was for about 50 people. And they did just a breakfast morning on, they changed the day sort of each month, but it was like either on a Tuesday or a Thursday. They just put on a breakfast down in the basement. People could then like grab it and then go back up if they wanted to, or sit around and have a chat. And again, it's sort of slightly out of hours because it would be from about 8:30 to 9. So you're not impacting the working day. People don't feel too bad about it, but they are having those moments of interaction and building teams. So if you are back to back, then things like, and you know your company is back to back, and maybe that's just the way it's got to be for now. You might consider those lunchtime efforts, those pre-start to the day efforts as well.
Brilliant. So kind of encouraging those little breaks and the little social interactions. I'm just looking at the comments again, and this sounds fantastic. Wellness hostel in the Netherlands. Despite limited space, they had a gym across the entire hostel, simply placing treadmills, weights, and plants across the hallways. Didn't cost much, and the guests loved it. So lots of wellness tools, even in a limited space. Sounds brilliant.
It does sound brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to go, I suppose, slightly in a different direction then, because you're mentioning the kinds of trends that companies and people are most interested in. I suppose a big one would be around, sustainability and the kind of environmental impact, and sort of designing workplaces for a greener future. What are your thoughts on that? Is it important to people? What kind of things do they need to know? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely important, and I think the message is ringing true for a lot. And as I mentioned, that demographic that's going to be sort of the biggest occupier of your workforce within a few years' time, plus the generations before that, very, very actively seeking out organisations that do have a strong message in sustainability, a green message, a green agenda. Again, not discounting the other generations, but really the trends are showing that this is coming through, and people are expecting it. So it's not just a nice to have anymore, and it's not just how many trees are you planting to offset your emissions. It's they really do want to see the difference it's making, and then the fact that they can make a difference by joining your organisation. So important, definitely. Even from a business perspective, again, what you're putting out as your corporate social responsibility. What's for us, a lot of our tenders do specify, what's your approach to sustainable buildings, and how are you going to do this? What's your own carbon emission? And we get scored on that within our tender processes. So, from a business perspective as well as an ethical perspective, and it's the right thing to do. It's that there's a lot riding on this. The unfortunate thing, I think, is for a lot of businesses and their buildings, it costs a lot of money to make big changes. And as with all the brilliant things that you can see in your office space, this is something that you can't necessarily see all the time. So you're looking at your heating and cooling systems, all the mechanical and electrical things, your lightings. And that's something that, like I say, it goes above the ceilings and below the floors. People don't see it all the time. They notice it when it goes wrong. But yeah, they're some of the biggest costs that are going to be sunk into your refurbishment if you want to really push that green side of it. That's if you've got a bigger space and you really want to go for an excellent approach to that. But sometimes you can also, it's all about that education piece and taking people on that journey with you. If you've like some of the furniture items that we're putting in are fully recyclable. They might be hemp chairs that you could literally just take the top off and put into the ground, and it biodegrades. There's a lot of work going into the furniture choices. Carpet tiles, for example, there's so many organisations now that supply us with those, and they'll take back what you've got already, and recycle them and turn them into either carpet tiles again or other things. So that's a big part of what we'll be doing. And you might spend a little bit more upfront putting in carpet tiles that can then be recycled later on, but really you're thinking over the cost of their life cycle. You're taking into account what really matters. So there's all of that side of things. There's simple recycling in your organization, making sure that you're doing that and you're encouraging people to do it. Messaging, from a really basic perspective, because if you're quite a small organization, there might not be quite as much that you can do. A lot of messaging, a lot of communicating, electric vehicle charging, changing your fleet to electric. We're looking at putting we're getting solar panels put on our roof soon, but that again is a big investment. However, it's going to charge our side of the building completely. So there's a lot that you can do. Unfortunately, a lot of it goes, like I say, unnoticed. But again, talk about it, talk about the message. Work with your design team if you're working with a design organization to make sure that actually the partition that they're putting up is built to the size that the material comes in, rather than a bit smaller, so you're reducing any waste. Really simple things like that.
Yeah,
pushing that agenda right from the beginning and making sure it's not an afterthought, I think, is important.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that's such a good point about, like, yeah, it might cost a bit more upfront, but the likes of the solar panels, or the like, everyone, I'm sure, is kind of feeling the pinch a little bit in terms of the energy costs going up. And from some of the conversations we're having with small businesses, like, it's putting some companies out of business because of the high kind of energy costs and everything like that. So yeah, it definitely would be an upfront investment, but long term, it's going to make a big difference. And yeah, like you say about the messaging, I think that actually just really nicely ties into, I'll just share in the chat the event that we have next month. So it's coming up on the 14th of June, and I just thought I'd share it there because it's just so relevant to what you were saying, because it's about basically how can you authentically share your sustainability story, what you're doing, and that's regardless of where you're currently at on that journey, but how to, I suppose, avoid greenwashing and just actually sharing it authentically with your team or your clients. That can just be a valuable one. So just tied in there with what you were saying. So feel free to register for that. That's in the chat there. So I suppose, Becky, yeah, is there when it comes to, I think we've kind of been talking about it already, but is there anything in particular that you're certain workplaces are doing this really well? All the things that we've kind of mentioned, you're kind of going, yeah, they're nailing it. And you don't have to necessarily name names, but yeah, I suppose who kind of comes to mind when you think, yeah, they're really putting in the effort and they're doing it well?
It's really hard to define, I think, because so many are doing it well for them. So this is where that, I guess, that consultancy piece right at the beginning is so important, because what matters to an organization depends on what they do, what their people need and want, and who they are, what their vision is, all of those things. So what one organization does really well could look entirely different to what another organization is doing really well.
Yeah.
So there's an organisation we're working with in Liverpool at the moment, a big gaming organisation. So they're a game developer, and they're doing brilliant things. They've got this amazing building that's got personality of its own. They're tying it in with their own personality and their brand, what their people want, what's going to really help attract talent. And they've also got a large remote workforce as well that they recruited over the pandemic, because actually they were like, why limit our talent? So it's a space that they can then come and use if they want to. They can tap into it whenever they want. There's space available, but also the technology in there is so much better that they can interact, almost live stream each other's days within this technology, just because it's a way to create that more inclusive culture. So they're doing this incredibly well in their own way. However, that wouldn't work for, we work with a lot of housing associations who don't have the budgets, and their focus is on community, because a lot of what they need to do, or anything that they change within their workplace, is coming out of almost tenants' rent money. That's how they would see it if they're in social housing. So what they've got to do has to have, like I was talking about, impact, a big impact. And a lot of that at the moment is about creating some community space, where it might be a cafe, it might be somewhere that their customers can come in and access support in a much less formal and intimidating way. It's a much more an environment that's inclusive for children to, if they're coming in because you have to be there, they've got no daycare or something, there's somewhere that they can be, somewhere that if you're a vulnerable adult, you could come in and feel safe and comfortable. So entirely different to that other organization, but and then behind the scenes, you're creating spaces for these housing association colleagues that they can again work as productively and effectively and positively as possible for their customers. Essentially, that's at the end of the day their priority. So that might also include, there's that martyr statement almost, where we work in this a space with just white walls, it's all like downtrodden, because actually all the money has got to go into our customers, but that's not going to make you produce your best work or help you produce your best
Mm.
work. So by just putting imagery on the wall, maybe that represents your brand, represents the people that you support in the community. So someone in finance who doesn't really get in touch with your end user, they still feel connected to the purpose and the goal. So
Yeah,
it's all about these things that what works for one organization, like I say, it might not work for another. So the legal sector as well are doing a lot of them have a little bit more money to put into these projects, but again, it's about creating spaces that gets them the best talent, the most talented people want to come and join them. And part of it's social, part of it's a lot of it in fact is learning from others, learning from mentors or their senior colleagues. So in a hybrid world, I think we're finding sometimes that those in more comfortable home environments might work from home, who often are a bit more senior. And then the juniors that are coming in and want to learn from these people that are sort of sat looking around like, oh, where is everyone? So by creating spaces that everybody wants and can work from, you're going to create that multi-generational return to the office as well and support there. So that's, like I say, there's so many different things that different organizations are doing, but you're more than welcome to take a look on our website and look at some of the videos of what different sizes of organizations are going through, different sectors, and understand a bit more about the design, and we'll talk through them in the videos. So
brilliant. Yeah, and we'll be sending out an email to everyone that will just sort of, give them the link for where to find that if they do want to get a bit more information or see more examples. But I think that's such a good point, that it really is so unique that, if one company goes, oh, I like what they've done, let's just copy and paste it, without really thinking of who are we, what do we want from our work, that it's probably not going to be as effective. And just into the chat, just echoing that, there's a social enterprise in Scotland that works on those things, the Social Bite. They employ and provide accommodation for homeless people to help them get back on their feet, where they can interact with colleagues and customers at work and help employees coming out of a difficult situation towards mastery. So it really just, I suppose, depends there on who you are, what you're doing, what you want to convey to your team, to your clients.
Absolutely. That point about maybe your diversity and different socio-economic backgrounds. So people that maybe have been homeless in the past and now coming into employment, what else do they need within your space? Because you might want to put more showers in, you might want to have more spaces that are designated for well-being. Not necessarily for that community, but you've also got multi-faith rooms. So for example, the Muslim community, if they're coming in to work in a space, or they're making that choice in the morning about whether they work in your office or at home, but your office doesn't provide anywhere for them to pray throughout the day appropriately anyway, then maybe they'll stay at home. So considering that. Mothers returning to the workplace, so spaces for nursing mothers to be, a lot of, as I mentioned before, the autistic community or the neurodiversity community, spaces that they can maybe go and ground themselves if they're feeling a little bit overwhelmed. And the location of those spaces is important as well. So making sure that they're maybe close to your core, so your lifts and your stairs, your entrances, because if you're having a emotive moment, you don't want to have to walk through all your colleagues and look distressed, and then someone grabs you because they're like, oh, I need you to finish this report, and you're like, so somewhere nice and discreet that people can go to. It's so important, and something that's much more prevalent in the workplace now than maybe it was before.
And I think it probably just speaks to, I suppose in the past, it's not that maybe necessarily the leadership didn't care about those people necessarily, but it's just, I suppose, if you've never lived through that, like if you've never had the experience of, say, not being able to get into a building because they didn't have adequate, ramps or something like that. If you've never really had that experience, you've never needed it, you just probably just don't consider it. So I suppose having a team of experts to go, have you considered this? And what about this? And, could probably be really valuable. I feel like I could just talk to you all day, but I could chat and chat. But I suppose if anyone is, really curious about this and wants to get a bit more information, where should they go?
So you can either, I think, probably send out on LinkedIn. You're welcome to reach out on LinkedIn. I'm quite active there. As I mentioned before, you can go onto our website and take a little look around some of the things that we do. There's a lot of blog posts and white papers that you can access that, if you're just considering something or thinking, oh, where do I start? That might be a place to go to just gain a bit more insight. Again, there's email addresses on there, so you're welcome to reach out and have a chat with us. Basically, we're more than happy to do that and just understand you a little bit more, or point you in the right direction anyway.
Brilliant. Yeah. So we'll be sending out emails afterwards, as we usually do. So we usually get a few people asking for, the recordings for each session. So we send those out afterwards. And I'll have just a link to your own LinkedIn. And also, I suppose a lot of this came from the research that you've done. So we can link to that paper as well that people can download as well. So I suppose I did mention earlier about the upcoming event, which we have into the chat at the moment, about developing or communicating your sustainability journey. If you scan that QR code, or you could basically get access to all the useful links that we usually share. So we have a YouTube playlist where you can see all the previous recordings. If you follow us on Eventbrite or LinkedIn, you'll be kept up to date. I think Sophie will just pop a couple of links into the chat there. You can see our LinkedIn group. So lots of ways to keep in touch. I can see a few comments coming in there, giving food for thought and finding it an interesting topic. So I'll hang on for another couple of minutes just in case anyone wants to have a chat. But for anyone else to drop off, just want to say thank you again so much, Becky. This is really, really interesting. So thanks for sharing your experience and wisdom, and thanks everyone for joining us today, and hopefully see you at the next event on the 14th of June.